This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I'm your host, Steve Gould, as the man said. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for all the recent 5-star reviews. I really appreciate it. I love that. Every time I get one, every time I reset my phone or check Apple Podcasts, I get pumped to see that. So we're at like 780. I'd love to get to 1K. So if you love the show, please keep doing that. That's really helpful. Also, the Patreon is growing. I really appreciate that. Appreciate all the support there. There's a couple different options. You can do patrolman. You can do sergeant. They have different extras to them. Basically, you'll get access to like a Facebook-like feed. You'll have direct access to me. I'll send you a TPS logo sticker, and give you, if you do the sergeant level, you'll get some extras like you'll get a shout out on the show, which I do at the end now. You'll hear that. So if you really love the show and you really want to support it financially, Patreon's the way to go. Links in the show notes. And if you can't afford it, not a big deal. If it's not like in the budget, the show's going to remain free. I'm going to keep doing it. And you can just enjoy it that way because I want as many people to hear it as possible. So today is going to be a great interview. We have a federal agent on. I love talking to the federal guys. Super interesting. Came highly recommended from a few other federal agents. So he's got 29 years on as a special agent. He was with U.S. Customs, which later was absorbed and turned into Homeland Security. He's done investigations involving smuggling, money laundering, terrorism, human trafficking, immigration fraud, and so many more. He's done anything you can think of, he's done. Without further ado, I want to bring on retired Special Agent Alex Alonso. Alex.
Hey, Steve. Thank you, man. Great intro. Thank you, sir.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm honored that you came on, and you came highly recommended from two other guests. Like almost the first words out of their mouth before we even started the interview was, you got to get Alex Alonso on. I'm like, okay, I will.
That's Bob Starkman, right? And Lorenzo Toledo.
Yes. Yeah, those guys were great.
Worked with those guys in different realms of the career, with Lorenzo undercover operations and with Bob on money laundering cases. And it was actually Bob who got me out on my first surveillance. So he's, we go way back.
That's awesome. And did you end up turning into a boss in the agency?
Yeah, I stuck with it and I kept on, and I ended up going and rising up to the level of an assistant SAC, assistant special agent in charge, and then went overseas and did that route and became an attache, where I was in Italy and also Spain.
That's very cool. Yeah, everybody remembers a good boss, because it's typically you get a lot of bad ones. So when you get a good one, you remember them.
Well, those guys were great, right? I never had to do, but they had their own direction. They basically, did what needed to be done in those days.
Yeah, I find that a lot in law enforcement. There's mostly like as a cop, federal agent, state trooper, whatever, you really don't want that. You don't want that attention from the supervisor. It's embarrassing, to be correct. I think cops have a lot of pride. So typically we try to
Absolutely.
Make sure there's nothing you can say. Like everything looks fine.
That's correct.
So Alex, Customs is kind of a unique agency to start with. How did you get attracted to that, or how did you end up there?
Well, it's a funny story, Steve, because all I wanted to be was a cop, right? That's what I had. I remember I was a young kid sitting on my porch in Hialeah, Florida. That's where I'm from, right? I'm Cuban, background, so
yep.
A lot of Cubans came when they immigrated to the U.S., went to Hialeah or to New York, that area, right? But my family went to Hialeah, and I used to sit on the porch with my grandfather, listen to his stories, and I'm thinking, man, I would love to be able to travel and do all these things that he was saying. And during one of those story sessions, this car pulls up in front of my house, and I don't recognize it. And I'm thinking, who are these guys sitting in front of my house? My mom's about to come from work, and these guys are blocking the driveway. So I go up there, and I'm, knocking on the window, and I'm like, who are you guys? What's going on? I'm a young kid, I'm not sure what's going on. And they're just looking at me, just holding up the finger like, hey, my mom's about to come. Who are you guys? Whatever. All of a sudden, the guy reaches into his shirt, whips out a badge, nice. Opens the door, pushes me. I go back. They take off running, guns blazing. Anyways, a guy's coming down the street who I know, And they take him down, they arrest him and take him. And I'm in shock. I'm like, what has just gone on? And these guys were, plain clothes,
Yeah.
really cool Camaro. It wasn't like, they did not look like cops at all, right?
Right.
So anyways, they take this guy, and as he's putting him in the back seat, he tells me, sorry, kid, just doing them a job. And they take off, and I'm thinking, that's a job. That's what I want to do. That's the coolest thing I've ever seen, right? So I applied with everybody. Applied with City of Miami, Metro Dade, Homestead. I applied with every police department I could. I even did some federal ones which I didn't know what they were at the time. I went through all the interviews and would pass everything, right? But my driving record, I had a horrible driving record when I was a kid, and it was coming back to haunt me. And I remember the last interview I had with the local police department. They said, "Look, Alex, you have a great background, personality. We did your all these aptitude tests and things like that, but you have a horrible driving record. You're gonna, the people you'll be stopping will probably have better driving records than you. So come back and see us in a year." And I left there, Steve. I was devastated.
I bet.
I got home and there was an envelope, and I had also applied for the immigration service at the beginning, which is actually where I started, the Border Patrol, U.S. Border Patrol. And I applied with them and eventually got on. And then while in the academy, applied with the U.S. Customs Service. And on the day of my graduation, the background investigator for the U.S. Customs Service was there, and I passed everything and eventually got to Miami, which was fantastic.
That's cool.
How I got into the feds.
No, that's cool. It's funny when I did backgrounds for LAPD, and as they're kind of loosening all these other drug standards, like still super tight on driving. We were kind of like, come on,
Yeah. But, I know but destiny has a way, right? So because that's what I wanted to be. I loved, I thought it was the coolest thing to be back then I was looking for the city of Miami or Metro, and it just, it took me another route. But I'm glad because it opened my eyes to such a whole different world.
Absolutely.
Getting into the feds.
Yeah, even if you ended up in that local department and like you liked it, but you stayed there, like you would be fighting to get an undercover spot. You would be, they're limited. They're like sought after. Guys sit in them for 30 years. So the way you went, you opened the door to a million different things you could do.
It was a great journey, right? So it took me. So I'm here in Hialeah. Then took me to Texas on the border. Got to learn immigration laws and started understanding that situation. And then almost immediately, I was only in the Border Patrol maybe, 10 months at the most. And then I got picked up on a transfer to the Miami office as a criminal investigator, working the boats right during the time when we had Blue Thunder, those go fast speedboats on the water. And it was like a kid in a candy store, just getting to that. I remember getting to the office my first day on the job there, and I'm going up to our, director's office to, first day getting signed in. And I get in the elevator, and a couple of guys come off the boats. You could tell they had just come off from a patrol, and they're like, "Are you a new guy here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I just got transferred over. Can't wait." And the guy's looking at me, and he says, "You're going to have to be on the boats, right?" I'm like, yeah, I can't wait. He goes, "And at least 5 years." And I'm thinking to myself, 5 years? I'm hoping to be there for as long as I can. And I guess they had been fed up, right? Because on the boats, you had to patrol. And it was a blast. But it after a while, it took a toll, right? Every night, every day, pounding the water out there. And so the place to be was investigations. But it was really good.
Yeah. You kind of had to, they wanted you to know you were going to have to put some time in before you get where you want to be.
Exactly.
They love to tell the new guy,
Yeah, but for me, Steve, it was, excuse me, it was kind of good because, so I'm Cuban, and I had that, I grew up in Miami. I knew the waters, I knew the area.
Yep.
And so on the boats, the guys we were stopping at the time, this was in the 80s, were Cuban fishermen, boat guys that were going out picking up loads. Back then it was the airdrops. It was big marijuana. It was marijuana and cocaine bales started coming later, but there were airdrops, and it was the Cuban fishermen who were the transporters. And a lot of the guys at the time couldn't really communicate with him. So I could, and I was able to, interview them differently than just your typical guy trying to, speak in English and translation and that kind of thing. And so some of the investigative groups started getting me to go with them on their cases, which were the bigger cases, right? I was just interdiction at the time, but guys like Starkman, right, who were in money laundering groups and wanted to, hey, have additional guys. Starkman was actually great because he would get us out and help me get in the cases with him. And so I could help and interview them and say, no, this guy's full of shit, or excuse me, this guy's lying. He's not telling you what's up. And so that was good. So it was actually Starkman who helped me get off of the boats, as they say, into investigations.
That's great. Yeah. So speaking Spanish is huge. I mean, there's a lot more border guys and cops in the South, Florida that can now, but up where I'm at in the Northeast, it's still. I mean, I hear it on the radio all the time because I'm on a county board. We have a Spanish speaker that can come to my stop, get an OUI or something. And it's so easy for them, even if a lot of times they do speak, they understand you, but they're just going to say, no comprendo. Like they're not going to, well, you get a Spanish speaker there and they're like, oh, I'm screwed. They got to talk.
And for me, it was just not the Spanish, right? It was just the specific like Cuban Spanish. And because you knew
the culture and everything. Yeah.
Right, and that kind of eased me into like the undercover ops later on. So it was helpful for me that being able to live in those both worlds.
Yeah, I can imagine. I wanted to ask you just to go back for a second. You were in academy, and you were doing a background for a different agency. How did those agencies feel about that? Did they think, it's all federal, or were they like, this sucks?
No, it was not good, right? So, but the Border Patrol. The Border Patrol at the time, they knew because they were recruiting. I'm very thankful to the Border Patrol because it was my foot into the federal system, right?
Right.
And I actually liked the job. I loved what I did. If it wouldn't been that it would have taken, if it wouldn't be that I would have had to stick it out there in another area, I would have probably stayed with the Border Patrol. But Customs offered me back home. I was back in Miami, back with my family. So you could at the time move a lot faster in the federal system was grades going up, right? So I could move a lot faster. In fact, when I got my transfer, at the time I was still what they call a trainee for the Border Patrol, and I remember my the patrol agent in charge there on my day off sent somebody to come to my house and say, hey, he wants to talk to you. So I'm like, oh man, what did I do? Am I in trouble? Am I gonna, I didn't know. Right. So I went to his office and he said, hey, look, we got this from Washington, basically saying that the U.S. Customs Service was picking me up in the Miami area for a criminal investigator spot, and I was at the time a GS5, and Customs was picking me up as a GS5 as well. So it was technically like the same grade level,
right?
But in Customs you can move up faster. So he asked me, what do you want to do? And I was, I'm a new guy's first time.
It's awkward.
Yes, it's very awkward. So he saw that, and I'm thankful to that guy to this day, because he got up and closed the door and he goes, listen, let me help you. We'd love to keep you here. We'd love to have you here, but I understand. I know you're from Miami. This is a position in Miami. U.S. Customs Service, you can move up in the grade system a little bit quicker than you could with us in the Border Patrol. So I don't want to push you either way, but you need to make this decision. And so I'm glad he did that, because it kind of set me straight. And I did. I accepted the position and stayed in Texas for a couple more months, finishing out, and then got transferred to Miami.
Right.
So I was always grateful to that supervisor.
Yeah, absolutely.
He set me right instead of just saying, no, you should stay here. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you ever see that movie Coneheads?
Yes, absolutely.
I just watched it because my kids wanted to watch it the other night, and the guys on the boats, we're full. You got to go back. We don't have jobs to employ all of you. I think they were ICE, but
yeah.
I just thought about that when I was thinking about the boats.
But Steve, I got to tell you, the boats was the best. Imagine Miami on the water. You are, I was 25 years old.
What boats are you running? Like big fountains or Donzies or?
Yeah, well, there were Donzies and the bigger catamarans and we nicknamed them Blue Lightning. I don't know. There's a whole issue about it. Don Arano, he actually manufactured. He would manufacture boats for the smuggling organizations, and he would also manufacture ours.
What a prick.
So we can keep up with him. And
Would he put Kevlar in the fiberglass and all that?
dude, they would kick our butt. We would be chasing these boats constantly and always playing catch up. If it wasn't for the really skillful maneuvering of the captains we had, we would probably never have caught any of these guys. So here it is. First time I'm on the boats, we go. We used to have something called the Blue Lightning Operations Center, and they would call out targets. Okay, there's a target out there. We would be waiting for boats coming in from the Bahamas, usually, either that or airdrops out at sea and then coming into either Key West or the South Florida area. Right. So I'm on it. I'm on this boat, and we're following a target. And sure enough, we meet up with 3 boats. They're all blacked out, and they just split. One in the middle, one this way. We decided to chase one way, and you could see them. We're in their wake, and they're just tossing bales overseas, and we're trying.
Is this broad daylight?
This is broad daylight.
Wow.
Yeah, but it was at all times. It was nighttime, daytime. It was wild. So that was one of my first outings, and I thought, this is a blast. And so at other times, it would just be patrolling. A couple of weeks in, I got sent to the Bahamas for 2 weeks. There was like a base boat out there. We would go meet it, just stay out in the water for 3 days and just waiting. Any targets, we'd get tinged and just go out and do searches and do all that kind of stuff. It was a blast.
That's awesome.
To do that. So.
That's cool. When you were in Texas, was your Spanish not as, were you able to pull out the same kind of relationship in Texas with Mexicans?
No, it was tougher because it was not the same Spanish. And I learned that quickly, right? So I grew up in as I said, my parents are Cuban, and it was not a learned, in school, right? My language is picked up from my family, my friends, right? Back and forth at the house, we spoke Spanish. Outside, English, right? But all my friends were mainly in the same situation, right? We grew up with similar situations, right? We spoke Cuban style Spanish. Now on the Mexican border, the southwest border, it is totally different, right? It's the Mexican influenced Spanish, and like the what they call Tex-Mex, right? Like different words for different things. So, but luckily, while in the academy, I had a lot of friends that I would say, hey, how do you say this? I got great grades in the academy. In fact, I graduated number 1 in the class in the Border Patrol.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was just because I knew how to translate, I knew how to say it. It's just certain words are just spoken differently. So when you encountered individuals that you're trying to either recruit or just talk to, I had to make an effort because it was not the same Spanish.
I was wondering about that. I had a Tennessee officer on a while back. Great interview, and he's a Southern guy, but he's just got a gift for languages. So he knows Spanish and some other languages. And I said it's got to be funny when you show up, and these guys think they're just fooling all these sheriffs, and you show up and he goes, they can't believe the Spanish is coming out of my mouth.
That he could do it. Well, my partner, my roommate in the Border Patrol, he was from Arkansas, and he had the ability to pick up the language incredibly, and he did it. I mean, and he before he got there, he couldn't speak a lick of Spanish, and I would help him, as far as I knew, but he could just pick it up. And this is the type of guy that, he'd be out in the academy all weekend, just partying, doing everything. Then he'd get home on Sunday night with a bottle of wild turkey, and he'd say, all right, Alex, how do you say this? How do you say that? How do you do this? How do you do that? What does this mean? And I'd be like, man, Mike, please let me sleep. I got a test tomorrow. But I'd tell him. And the next day, he'd get better grades than me.
Wow.
He was amazing. He could just do it. He could just pick it up.
One of those minds. Yeah, I took it all through high school, and I wanted so badly to be able to speak it. Nothing impresses me more than speaking another language or playing the piano. All things I can't do.
Yeah.
And I tried. I visited my buddy in Spain for 2 weeks in college, and I did notice that when he was at class and I was just kind of banging around Madrid, when you're submerged, you do get better faster. I learned how to, order sandwiches and coffee and kind of say it the right way rather than the textbook way. But as soon as I left there, it
And,
was like,
yeah, and Spain and especially Madrid, they have a very heavy Castilian accent, right? So
it's a
so it's
lisp.
totally different. It's totally different than the Mexico Spanish or the Cuban Spanish. It's the the mother language, as they say, right? And you have to, and even that is totally different.
I thought everybody had a lisp.
I
They're like, "Como te llamas?" And I was like,
yeah.
and so my buddy's roommate told me, he goes, "Well, back in the day," and I asked the Tennessee guy this, and he said it's not true. But I said, "Why does everybody have a lisp with their Spanish?" And he said, "Oh, because there was a king that had a lisp, and he
Yeah.
made everybody speak with a lisp." I'm like, "Is that true?"
No, that's what they say, but what it is that it's the way they differentiate the S from the Z sound, right? And that's really what it is, and it's just their the way that it's been done. So
That's
it's
interesting.
interesting.
So my father was a police officer on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, for 32 years, and in the 70s, they had one of the biggest marijuana busts at the time in the country in this little town in Cape Cod. And the story is just, you remind me when you said the bales of marijuana. The local fishing fleet got hooked up with these guys to go offshore and bring bales of pot in. And then, as you know, a pot then was like super. This was a lot of
Yeah.
money involved. There was not even close to being legal. So they got all the police came in on their time off, and early in the morning they went down to Snow Shore, I think it was, or Priscilla Landing, and it's all in Orleans. And they busted these local fishermen. They had tons of bales of pot, and for my dad, for months they were getting calls from property owners on the water. Just bales would wash up because they saw the cops coming, and so they'd be like, "Oh, we got 12 more bales to go pick up at the beach." And this is like a town. There's like 3,000 people in this town, so it was like this huge thing. It's crazy.
It's amazing. No, and imagine that was this was happening left and right in South Florida at the time. So it was nothing for bales to be washed up on shore. People at the beach are reporting, "Hey, we found there's a boat just floating, or just bales of marijuana flying." It got so bad that they had a term for it. Square groupers, right? So you found
Yeah.
we found some more square groupers, guys.
Yeah, you don't have to buy your pot. Just take a handful, stick in your pocket, and call the
That was
cops.
it. That was
That's
it.
funny. Alex, can you tell us about the first hot call you responded to, or first thing you were involved in that really gave you like an adrenaline dump?
Well, that one that I was talking to you about, it was on a boat, and a guy, we had just gotten on the shift, and out of Bimini, we had a excuse me, we had an agreement with the Bahamian Defense Force that they would allow our interdiction officers, our marine and investigators, to be on boats in patrolling the Bahamian waters as long as we had a Bahamian Defense Force officer with us, right? And so it was so bad coming out of Bimini that's why we wanted to be up there with them, right? So my assignment on that day was going out of the Miami office into the waters, and then someone in the Bahamas was patrolling waters there. And we got the word that there had been a boat that was coming out, and it was trying to intercept our boat in the Bahamas. And so
Oh,
they got in the way, right? And then the captain of our boat decided he went to pick up the Bahamian Defense Force officer, and the guy wasn't ready. So we weren't sure what was going on, whether the guy was, just purposely waiting, or I
right.
just, it was kind
How
of a
can you have
tough
this guy in the
situation.
boat with you? It'd be so nerve wracking. Like, never turn your back to
You,
him.
you couldn't be, we're riding it. We ended up being the ones that picked the guy up on the boat, and eventually getting there, right? But these guys would jump on your boat. They had these old rusted Sterling type machine guns,
Yeah.
and they didn't have water. They didn't have food. You always had to take care of
Oh,
them because
geez. It's
they
probably
were
their favorite day
so.
of the week. Oh, the Americans will feed me.
Yeah, you'd be riding, and all of a sudden you hear, somebody fired, and you go back, and he'd be like, "Hey, I'm sorry, my gun." I'm like,
Oh
"No,
my God.
put him up front, just in case so
No
it doesn't
thanks.
shoot anybody." But on this particular day, our guy decided, you know what, I'm not. We don't have time to pick up the Bahamian officer, so he just went, and they tried to intercept him, and he rammed right through the boat. like just the Coast Guard. I wish I had a picture to show you, Steve. I think I actually might. I'll get that to you. But
you
there's
ran
a
through his
picture.
boat, or he ran through your boat?
I wasn't on this boat. I was on the boat coming in, getting the actual. We ended up catching the guys that had the load on.
Okay.
But the boat that was with us, that had departed with us, actually went on. Land, like basically crushed him over because he was trying to block our way or the way.
Right.
And the Coast Guard has this beautiful picture of the guys jumping off the boat. One guy this way, one guy
Yeah.
while our boat is coming across. But we got in a little bit of problem with that because we didn't pick up the Bahamian Defense Force officer like we should.
Right.
So we got a little bit of hot water, but it turned out okay. They gave us a pass on that one, and we ended up getting the load, our boat, and ended up catching the guy. And we just kept on circling until he just couldn't outmaneuver us, and then we got on the boat and took him. So
wow,
it was like 315 kilos.
Damn. So no doubt you guys are armed to the teeth out there, but as far as being in distress, who's your person that's gonna show up? Is it the Coast Guard? I mean, who's gonna come help you out if, like, say they pop up a minigun and like turn your boat into Swiss cheese or something?
We're right there with them, right? We're firing right back at them. So yeah, it could either be the Coast Guard or another one of our units. At the time, we would coordinate with the Coast Guard a lot because they're out there, we're out there, and so that's what we would do. So in this case, we had the actual boat that came out of Bimini that ran over the boat,
right.
Our boat, and then another backup boat that came to help us, and that's how we were able to pin the guy down. They didn't have weapons, thank God, right? Because we would eventually used to get into shootouts in the water, but most of the time we'd end up overpowering. So in this particular one, no issues. But if we would have had to call backup, definitely we would count on the Coast Guard or our own other Marine units.
Gotcha. Damn. Have you ever seen when they armed the Merchant Marines? Those videos. It's pretty crazy. I don't know if it's Merchant Marines or if the Merchant Marines like hire like Blackwater or somebody else to be there, but they just cut these.
You mean the Somali pirates trying to come in? Yeah,
and they're like they just have a couple M4s and they just take them out. I mean, they just start blasting these boats as they come up, and these guys don't stand a chance.
Well, at the time, but believe it or not, in our policy, we had the ability to. I don't know if it's the same still, but at the time when I was on, we had the ability to fire across the bow, right? Across the bow.
Bow shot, yeah.
And if they didn't, then you can actually attempt to shoot out the engine. But let me tell you something, Steve. You're on the water. You're bouncing up and down.
I can imagine. Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't want to take those shots, but we had guys that did it, and we're actually pretty good at taking out engines. But I wasn't one of those guys.
Yeah, you need some of those like country boys who grew up in the Midwest that shoot, ground gophers at 1,000 yards with their 22s. That's what you need.
That's it. That's the guys. And believe me, we had those guys, and we were able to do it. But it was always controversial, right? You're shooting, and they're not armed, but we had to stop. They weren't, accepting our commands, that kind of stuff. So,
did you ever run into? Because I'm thinking of like this becoming like an international event, if you're exchanging rounds. Did you ever run into like a foreign law enforcement officer working with them, like catch them red-handed? That type of thing, or did they ever get aggressive with you?
Personally, I did not. What we did run into was the Bahamian. In my particular case, I had a Bahamian Defense Force officer on our boat, and we had pulled the boat over, and we were searching it, and they did not want to be searched, and they were like screaming and yelling at us, and we were like, stop your vessel, and they had stopped the vessel, but they were like, you're not getting on this boat, and one guy, pulled didn't pull a gun, but pulled like a fishing hook that was all rusted out and was
like a gaff,
trying to poke us.
Yeah,
trying to poke us. And the Bahamian Defense Force guy, he was kind of like stuck in the middle, and they're screaming at him and yelling at him as to why isn't he doing anything? Why are you allowing the Americans to be here in our country and this and that? And finally, I reached in the back, I got our shotgun, I jumped on the back and racked it. And I said, put it down or I'm going to shoot you. And everybody just, calmed down. We ended up getting on board, searching the vessel. It had nothing, but they were just upset that we were in their country messing with them. So not a lot of problems in the Bahamas, but we I did hear stories of other people getting involved into issues with other law enforcement entities out there.
Yeah, I always wondered about that since I interviewed Chris Strom. He was NYPD, then became got on intelligence teams in the Middle East, and he said they would find like marked American, they'd find American bills in terrorist cells that like were given to them by other intelligence agencies. I was like,
Wow.
that's bizarre that
Yeah.
these guys aren't talking enough to know what's going on.
Yeah.
That's freaky. Alex, can you tell us about like a really strange or bizarre thing you dealt with in your career?
Well, so after the votes, and again, that's why I was thankful to Bob Starkman, because he actually went into one of our leaders and said, "Hey, you know what? These guys, me and the guy who was my partner back at the time was Miles' son, and he went. Bob went into one of our supervisors and said, "Hey, you got to get these guys off the boats. We got to bring them into investigations." And he was successful in getting us that. So I attribute that to him. So
Nice.
Miles and we ended up going into this investigative group, and so we decided, hey, we could go out and gather intel and then start our own undercover op if we can, right? This was early on in the career, and so
And you had the freedom
that's
to
what
do that? They'd let you kind of cultivate your own thing?
we had a supervisor that was that way, right? That he would allow us to do it. But that
Nice.
first group, not yet, right? This first group, he just said, you go out there. At the time, it was the task force gathering in. They would be the ones that, our customs inspectors, the guys in uniform, would search a vessel or search a container cargo, or at the airport, search a plane and find dope. And then they'd call the task force group, and then the task force group would come out and do the surveillance. They would also call our group, and we would come out and, excuse me, do like a sort of an intelligence gathering type group. That was my first group, right? But a lot of the times, they would just, the DEA guys that were on that task force, they were so busy, they would say they don't have the time to do it. So we would take it and try to make something out of it. Right? On this particular night, I had just kind of gotten into investigations. I had gotten a new fancy car. It was kind of neat.
Hell yeah.
And two of the DEA guys, they get a call out, and they get like in a flower box at the airport, flower shipment. They got about 50 kilos. Ooh. And they've got the driver who went to go pick it up. Driver's a Nicaraguan guy, doesn't speak English. He's scared, out of his wits, and he doesn't know what to do, right? So DEA guys are talking to him, can't really get a lot. So they say, hey, let's call me. I was the duty guy for that group. And they said, can you come on out here? It's about 2 a.m, whatever. I'm like, absolutely. Man, I got in my car. I was like, highlight out there, got there. And I'm thinking, all right, what do we need to do? So this was kind of like my first undercover introduction to sort of undercover. And he said, look, just talk to this guy, see if he'll talk to you, see what's going on. So I sit with the guy, and he's nervous. And I'm telling him, in my Spanish, I'm smoothing it out with him. I'm like, listen, just where were you going to deliver it to? That's all we need to know. Tell me, we'll go, I'll ride with you, we'll make the delivery, and then we'll go from there. We can tell the judge that you cooperated and you helped us out, and it'll be better for you. So I convinced the guy. I tell the DA guys, all right, guys, he said he's got to take it to this location. It's a post office real close to where we were at. And he's like, all right, great, let's go. Make the call, do it. So I'm sitting in the van, 50 kilos in the back. I've got my gun. I got like a Hawaiian shirt on, right? So I got it's Miami. So it's kind of like, I got my gun out of the holster in the back, I think I'm cool. Yeah. So I sit in the van and I tell the guy, listen, just call a guy. And again, I'm just as nervous because this is kind of my first time doing it. I've got these like experienced DEA guys, and there's all these other guys around, and I'm thinking I can't mess up here, right? So
sure.
I tell the guy, just tell him that I'm your helper, that I'm working with you, right? Because that's believable. So he's like, okay. But he's super nervous. So he makes the call. The guy tells him, meet him at the post office. We get to the post office, Steve. Our van pulls up. We see a car, going in circles. And then finally he stops and gets out. Real personable guy. He gets out. He goes right up to the guy and he goes, hey. And then he looks at me and he stops in his tracks, right? And he goes, who's this guy? And it's all in Spanish, right?
Sure.
The Nicaraguan guy, he's just like, he's in shock and he can't talk, right?
Oh,
so the Nicaraguan guy turns to look at me. His eyes are blaring red, like, what do I say? He doesn't say anything. So I just immediately kick in, right? I'm like, hey, I'm Jose, whatever I said. I'm here with him. He said that I could help him. You could give me like, $50 or something like that. And he said, he stayed looking at me for a long time, and he's like, and he looks at the guy looks at him, so he goes, all right, go around the back, right? So meanwhile, we had a perimeter set up, and the plan was that the minute that we were going to offload the kilos into whatever next situation we were going to do, I was just going to, put my fingers through my hair, right? Like
Right.
back then I had more hair, right? So I was going to put my fingers through my hair. So we go to around the back, start doing the offloading, and I got one box in, another box in, and I figure, okay, this is the right time. So I'm like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, all right, man, here it comes. The cavalry's coming any moment now. Nothing. And
Oh
this is like in
no.
the back part of the post office, all dark. And the first guy, the Nicaraguan guy, he is freaking out because he knows something's about to go down, right? So
Yeah.
he's just looking around. The Peruvian guy hasn't noticed yet. So he's like, so once again, I do it. Now I'm getting paranoid, right? Because I'm thinking nobody's showing up. So
Oh.
I just finally took it into my own hands, right? I whip on my gun and I'm like, all right, police, back up. So I start screaming and yelling. The Peruvian guy's looking at me like in shock. What the hell? And I'm like, don't move. I'm nervous. I'm scared, right? I'm by
Yeah.
myself out there.
Totally.
And the funny thing is that I'm totally focused on the Peruvian guy. The Nicaraguan guy, the original guy, he's so nervous and scared that whatever I'm telling the Peruvian guy to do, he's doing. Put your hands on your head. Put them up. Get on your knees. And he's like obeying me, doing whatever I
Yeah.
say. And I'm like, so I'm thinking, I've made enough noise out here that somebody's coming. And I'm just standing there. And it seemed
Oh,
like a lifetime,
I
right?
bet.
And I'm thinking, where is everybody? So finally, and now they're getting antsy, right? They're like the Peruvian guy saying, "Hey, listen, like we can work something out," And I'm
Oh,
thinking he thinks I'm
jeez.
alone here.
Yeah,
So,
long enough to
anyways,
talk with him. He's like, hey, this is awkward.
yeah, that's how long. It was not that quick. So I
Oh
see
man.
down the road, backlit. It was a really cool DEA agent that I worked with. He's a really nice guy, but this is the first time I met him. He's running, and his hair's like flowing in the wind, and he's like, "Alex, I'm coming." His badge is bouncing off. Anyways, he finally makes it. All right, man, great job. I'm like ready to cuss them out, right? But I'm
Yeah.
thinking, I wonder if this is how it is because I've really never done it before, right? So, anyways, they get taken down. So he tells me, hey, why don't you talk to this guy and see where he was going to take it? So Nicaraguan guy gets, locked up. The Peruvian guy is now, he's a little more smoother, right? This guy knows he's been around a little bit. So
Might be
he's
more
like,
useful.
yeah, listen, I was going to deliver it. We can do this. It's a Colombian female. She's supposed to come and pick it up. We can tell her this. We can tell her that. So I tell the DEA guys, hey, look, this is what's going to be. He's like, let's try it. We go over back again, same situation. And so the pre-brief, I go, man, guys, please, I'm doing this. Just come when I do it. Like,
Well,
if
yeah,
you
what
see me do
happened?
it,
What was the deal?
well, they said that they were in a position and they couldn't see me. So I'm like,
Great.
well, guys, get in a position. It's going to be right here. All right. So, so they're like, all right, no problem. We got you. So back again, everybody we goes, Peruvian guy makes the call, female, Colombian female. She's like, okay, great. We're going to come out there. Anyway, so I'm sitting in the van. The guy's trying to talk me into like, hey, can I get less time? What's going on? What's happening? Where are you from? He's trying to make time. I tell him, look, just let's concentrate on
Yeah,
this.
shut up.
I'll tell him you did. Yeah, shut up because really, I'm really super nervous and my adrenaline is going
I can
through my
only
heart.
imagine,
My heart
brother.
is pumping out of my chest, Steve, because I've never, done this, right? And it's happening. So, anyways, sure enough, car starts circling the parking lot. Colombian girl shows up and she doesn't even want to get out of the car. She's like, okay, hurry up. When she sees me, she knew. She looked at me. She's like, oh, no. Just like that. She tells the guy, oh, no. And he's like, no. This is my friend. I'm telling you, this is the guy who brings it to me from the airport. No. I got to pay him. That's all. She's like, no. She's trying to back out, but she had made a mistake. She had pulled in, right? So we had immediately like gotten behind the car so we can put the stuff in the back. So she's like freaking out. So she's like, all right, put it in. Car's not even off, right? She's just on. She's just waiting. So we're getting one flower box and he's looking at me. He's stalling. And sure enough, I back out, hands through my hair. Boom. I'm like, all right, this time, no problem. I'm getting ready. Nothing.
Oh,
Again,
come
nothing,
on.
cricket. I'm like, what is going on here? And again, now I'm freaking out. So once again, nothing. So again, take my gun out. I go into the car. I'm like, police, back out. So she tries to back up. So I had to reach in, put the car in park. I take her keys. I'm running around the car. The Peruvian guy, I'm like, get on the ground, like like nuts. And again, after a few minutes, I got them both out there, and she's screaming at the Peruvian guy, "I'm gonna kill you! How dare you!" And in the wind, I see the guy again coming with his hair flowing in the wind, badge bouncing. I'm like, mother, I'm gonna kill this guy. Anyways, that was my first experience. And anyways, that case went well, and this and that, and that was my first experience doing undercover work
Oh, I love it.
with those guys.
Dude,
Later
that's
on,
what was it? Was it because you weren't? Were you on the wrong team? You weren't DEA, so they weren't like paying attention.
They just no. They just, I guess, where they positioned themselves, they couldn't see. But later, I was told, one of our customs guys who in uniform, he came up to me, he goes, "Hey, don't worry about it. I had you covered." He was on top of the building with a shotgun, like Tackleberry. He said, "If anything would have happened, you would have been the only guy standing." And I never saw him. Man, thank you, man. Thank you. And I remembered that day, and I said, any undercover thing I do from here on in, I will have somebody that I trust always having my back. And that's what I did from that point on. And it was a lot better.
Yeah, I know guys that work on task force, and they don't even like working with different team members from different counties. They all like to work with each other. And then, like, if you never worked with a guy before, like, you don't want to hop on their team. You just jumped right in there. I mean, you were probably a young guy. You're like, this is my chance.
Absolutely. That's exactly how I saw it. I popped out of that bed. I ran out there, and I was dying to jump in. It was what a great case, but I didn't know. I was very green, had no idea, had really never done any type of undercover work other than maybe some phone calls here and there, but nothing face to face like this. So
you must have had your heart beating your throat
the whole time. And later I got to know those DEA guys a lot, and we always laughed about that story. But man, later they all knew, hey, listen, Alex, nothing was going to happen to you out there. We had you, but for me, it seemed like an eternity. Out there, on your own.
Well, all you can think about too is all the stories you've heard where things do go wrong, horribly wrong. It's like, I'm the new guy got killed because X, Y, and Z.
Absolutely.
So like when it's all you're thinking about.
There have been an ATF guy, Ariel Rios, that had got shot early on. There are all these other things that were in my mind. That the Kiki Camarena was kind of fresh. It had happened, sometime afterwards, right? But or before. But all those things, like you think of, like when you do undercover type work. And man, it was a nurse. And I know Lorenzo always talked about this dream, right? That he talks about, that you can't, your gun is like, your bullet's not coming out of your gun or whatever. And for the longest time, I had those kind of nervous dreams. But after that, it was like a shot of adrenaline, and I loved it, and I couldn't wait. And my next thing was to set up our own undercover operation. Which we did.
And now you had done it, so you're like, all right, I got my feet wet. Let me ask you something, Alex. Like, when you're so new doing this, and you're in the car with the guy, and the first guy you talked about, was it Nigerian? No, Nicaraguan. You're in the car with this guy going to the post office. How bizarre is that? What do you talk about? Do you have the radio on? Is he just sitting there in silence?
It's the loneliest feeling in the world, Steve, because
you don't know this guy. This guy could easily stab you in the neck or something. Who knows?
Absolutely, exactly. Everybody else is putting on their vests, strapping their vests, getting their guns, checking their magazines, doing everything, and you're like in a Hawaiian shirt with, maybe sometimes you have your gun. In this case, I did, right in the back, and I thought, wow. So the first thing I did when I sat in the van with him, I told him, look, I'm going to tell you something. If you even try to tell that guy anything, I'm going to shoot you first. Just like that, very seriously. And he looked at me like, but that guy, he was so scared. I think he was more scared than I was. So so that wouldn't have been bad. But yeah, so we drove in silence basically to the place, and he was like, okay, where do I park here? Do this. And this is, I parked where the team had told me to park, where I thought they had eyes on me, but
right. Very important to park right here. Yeah. Oh man, I can only imagine. That's crazy. Alex, can you tell us about like one of your most intense or terrifying situations you were involved in?
So Um, we had then we ended up getting established, Steve. We ended up going into myself and my partner Miles, and we became part of another group, and it was the Cargo Investigations Group. And we, before I was into law enforcement, was in the import export business. Right? I knew the cargo industry and shipping and trucking and all that. So we thought, let's set up an undercover business like that where we can sell that we can transport for you. So you put the drugs or money in care of us, and we get it from point A to point B for a fee, right? We're
Perfect.
transporters. And that was like, that was big in those days. So we'd set up we got a nice building. The supervisor, I told him, look, if we're going to do this, we have to do it right, because people are going to be checking us out. We can't have some, shitty desks, messed up. We gotta do it right.
Right. It's
It's
gonna be
gonna be
legit.
classy. We're gonna have nice conference rooms and phones and secretaries and all this other stuff, right? So he's like, go for it. That was the good thing. We had a good boss who recognized that, and we did it, right? So this particular the cover was that my uncle owned this business. I knew about it. I knew the business, and I worked for my uncle. And to make money on the side, I would allow his business, his legitimate business, without him knowing, for it to be used for smuggling dope from wherever. And I could tell you how to do it. So I was not a real bad guy. I was more of a business guy. But
Perfect. Yeah, it's believable.
but I needed some money. I wanted money, right? So
Yep.
so I was very believable, right? That way I was not no badass from the street. I was just a guy who knew the business and I could talk it, right? So once again, we had partnered up with some DEA friends, and this particular guy had a case that he had a fugitive he was trying to track down, and the guy was in Brazil, and the guy wanted to smuggle coke, but he wanted to do suitcases, smaller shipments. So we convinced him through an informant that why do a small case? We have a guy who has this
Right.
business and bring in a whole container load. So he's like, well, I want to meet this guy. So we're like, all right. So we do the thing and give him our business information, and sure enough, the guy buys us 2 first-class tickets to go to Brazil.
Oh boy.
Myself and the informant. So now we have to sell this to the boss. Do we do this? Do we not? And I'm thinking, this is my first international undercover, right? So
I'm thinking of that movie
all right.
Blow when they go for the helicopter ride and they throw the guy out the friggin' helicopter.
I know. All those things go to my mind. But Steve, when I think about this now, I think, how the hell did I even think of that, doing that, something like that? But at the time, it's what you did.
Yeah.
You're 100% committed, and that's what we wanted to do, right? So here we are talking possibly a 500 kilos, 1,000 kilo load, and so this is what was the whole intention of that undercover operation. So convince the bosses. We go. I go with my partner, the DEA agent, and myself, and the informant. We fly down. The informant and I fly under our undercover credentials. We get to the country, get through, no problem. The informant sets himself up at the hotel. I then go to the briefing with the DEA attache who was going to help us cover the meat. And he tells us, you cannot move from this location. I was in Rio de Janeiro in one of the main hotels there. It says, this is the hotel. We're going to meet outside, and this is where you have to do all the business. And I tell the guy, listen, this is a Cuban guy from Miami. I'm Cuban. The informant's Cuban. The first thing he's want to do is going to take us out to drink, and mess around. He doesn't want to just sit and talk business. He doesn't know me. And the guy says,
Yeah.
no. We can't have that. We can't have you going out. So I knew it was going to be a mess. So
Now, are they
I'm
thinking because of like they wouldn't be able to keep you safe, that type of thing?
correct. And again, this is the responsibility of the DEA attaché at the time. And he's thinking, I want to keep you in a perimeter. He has some, I guess, Brazilian police with him, and DEA agents, and of course my partner, right, who doesn't know real,
Sure.
Anyways, but he's out there like covering my back. That's who I had covering my back, right? So I'm thinking, this is not going to work. So I tell the DEA agent whose case, we were helping in Miami, and I said, look, his name was Gene. Gene, this is not going to work because he's going to watch. He goes, well, I'll just try to keep them together. So I was all right. So sure enough, We get out there. I tell the CI we're sitting outside on the table, really nice. This is no guns, no nothing, no recording, nothing. So
In Rio
I
de
feel
Janeiro,
okay.
that's beautiful city, right? Where was?
Yeah, Rio de Janeiro, right,
Yeah.
right there on Copacabana Beach. Water's right across from us. It's
Wow.
beautiful, but it's dangerous, right?
Yeah.
You have these what they call favelas, and it's very, very dangerous, right? And it's easy to take you up into those neighborhoods, and you're never seen
See you
again,
later.
right? So, but I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm not really a bad guy. I'm actually here to be able to help him, right? So it can't be that bad, right? So, anyways, I tell the informant, listen, um, you, whatever you do, you have to back my play. We got to tell him we're going to meet somebody else too, and we can't do any partying or anything like that because that's the first thing he's going to want. And the informant's like, of course, man, of course, we're here, serious business, serious business. Like, all right, so perfect. So we order a couple of beers. We're waiting for the guy. Guy pulls up, right parks in the middle of the street, and he comes out like this, and he knows the CI, right? So he tells the CI, "Hey, what's happening, bro?" And they get up, they hug each other,
Sure.
they're like laughing back. They haven't seen each other in a while. He sits down, he shakes my hand, meets me, and I tell him, "Hey, well, you want a beer? This and that." He's like, "No, no, 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 no. Come on, let's get out of here. What are you guys doing?" That's
This
the
place
first thing out of
sucks.
his mouth. The first thing out of his mouth. He's like, "No, no, no. Let's go. This place, it's nothing. I'm gonna take you to a great place." And I'm like, "No, no. Listen, we gotta." And the CI is like, "Yeah, come on, man. Let's go, Alex. Let's go party." Instead of backing me, he's like right there. And so
Prick.
I'm thinking, all right, what do I do? What's my play here? Do I, I go against all my instinct, which was to stay there,
Oh,
or do I go? So of course, I'm still thinking by that time I had been doing some undercover work. I've been getting a little cocky in how I'm doing things, and I make the choice of I'm gonna go with the guy.
of course.
And I would, if I was that attaché, having been one later on in my career, I would have been pissed at me
Yeah,
for doing what I
I
did.
bet.
But I knew we could do it. So get in the car, and I could see my partner. He was across the street. He's looking at me like, "What are you doing?" So, anyways, get in the car, and they're talking. Everything's good, and the guy just keeps looking at me in the rearview mirror, and I'm
Ugh.
thinking, "Oh man!" And I had like I always do. I have like a pen in my hand, right? I had gotten something from the hotel either to write off the payment on the check for the beers. I don't know why I had it, but I had it in my hand. And he then we're driving, but everything's cool. We're on Copacabana Beach. The lights are still going on. And then we start driving into neighborhoods that there's no lights. It's all nervous and scary. And he just all he does. The informant's talking, just crap. I can't. I hear him. I hear the noise, but in my mind, it's going 100 miles an hour. Like, oh.
I mean, I would have jumped out of that car. See you later.
That's what I felt. That's what I felt like, Steve. I was like, oh no, I made a mistake. I immediately realized this is a bad idea. So he just keeps looking and looking, and he's driving, and then all of a sudden we stop somewhere. And now the informant's just, hey, what are we doing? And this is some place out of nowhere. He goes, no, give me a minute. And he runs out. So I'm cussing and yelling at the informant, like, what are you doing? Whatever. Anyways, he comes out with this girl, beautiful Brazilian girl. The informant gets in the back seat. She gets in the front seat and turns around, puts her hand on the seat, and just stares at me, like just staring at me. And he's looking at me through the mirror. I'm like,
Oh my
what's
gosh.
going on? I'm freaking out. I'm like, and he's talking to her in Portuguese. I can't make it out. And even
Yeah.
the informant's like, hey, what's going on? She's like, no, everything's cool. She has friends, and we're gonna go get some more friends. I'm like, oh. So I'm all nerves. I'm making like if conversation in my mind. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, did I use my right passport? Does he have contacts in immigration? Because the guy seems to be connected
jeez.
everywhere. So we end up.
Yeah, even checking into the country, you must think like, what if he's got people here that
Correct.
are going to tip him off?
Did he have someone? Did he have it? So all that's going through my head. But in my mind, I'm also saying, well, my undercover name in this one was Alejandro Alvarez. And that's all I kept saying to myself. This is who I am. My uncle owns this thing. This is what I'm here for. Da, da, da. I kept repeating that. Anyways, we pull up in another place. He tells the girl something in Portuguese. She gets out of the car, runs out. I'm thinking, all right, she's going to go get some friends. She comes back 2 minutes later, boom, sits down, does the same thing, turns around, puts she's going to watch the show.
What does she do? Yeah, I don't see this guy's
and I'm
brains
thinking,
get blown out.
Oh my God, what's going to happen here? What the hell is going on here? And everybody's looking, and he's looking at me in the rearview mirror, and they're just like waiting for something to happen. I'm like, and I finally I said like, hey, what's happening, George? The guy's name was George. What's happening? And he's like, wait, wait, wait. All of a sudden, Steve, there's a guy at my window, which to this day, even thinking about it, like the hairs on the back of my neck stand up.
Oh my gosh.
I can only explain him as a voodoo witch. I don't know how else to explain him. He was this big, like hulky, dark-skinned Brazilian guy with eyes like death. I don't know how else to explain it. Like, you can look in his eyes and it's almost like he's piercing your soul, like to look inside of you. I'm like, oh my God,
Saying Our Father real quick.
Yeah, I grew up in what was considered a pretty tough neighborhood that I could hold my own, but this guy was scaring me, and I'm looking at him in the eyes, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, I'm Alejandro Alvarez, I own this business, I'm trying to say that, and he just keeps looking at me, and it's just silent. I mean, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm thinking any minute now, shit's gonna hit the fan. I don't know what's going on here. Did the informant rat me out? What's happening?
Do you have a gun on you at this point?
No. I didn't bring one, first of all, because it would have been too much of a problem. Too many notifications to make. And I don't have a wire. I chose not to because I'm thinking, this is the first meet. The guy's not going to talk to me. He
might pat you down,
Yeah, he might. There's all kinds of things. So, but they're all looking at me, seeing how I'm reacting. Anyways, after about what seemed like an hour, which I'm sure it wasn't, but this voodoo guy goes back to the front window and tells him something in Portuguese. And they all like look at me, and then he walks away. The car starts driving away. Girl's still looking at me. He's still looking at me through the rearview. I have no idea what is about to occur, and then all of a sudden, in silent, we just appear on the lights again, and I'm like, my comfort level's coming back, right? I'm thinking, all right, what's going on? So we pull up to a club. And he goes to the door. He says, hey, these are my guests. And while we're waiting there, he goes, I just wanted to make sure I needed to check you out. And I'm like, who was that guy? He goes, he's my santero, right? I don't know, his
doctor
priest, I guess. Yeah. Well, witch doctor priest, right? Who tells him. And he said you're okay. That's what he said.
Not very good at his job.
Yeah, I know. You should fire that guy. So we go in. And we sit at this table, and he's got, not once did we talk about anything, just whiskey. He's trying to
just wants to get to know you. Yeah,
absolutely. He's got girls sitting with. We got a hold. So I made it through that night, and I pretended that I got really wasted, and that I had to get back to the hotel because I wasn't feeling well, too wasted, whatever. So because they wanted to keep partying, they wanted to then break off
I'm
from there. Go with the girls and all that stuff. So I had to so he had two girls bring me back to the hotel. Just wanted to make sure what room I was in. And that I anticipated, right? So we had our nice room, we had everything out there, got to the room, he leaves. And a short time later, I get a call from my partner. He's like, where the F have you been? What happened? Are you all right? Are you alive? Like, yeah. He goes, we're in trouble, man. We're going to be kicked out of here. The guy's pissed. The DEA guy's pissed. We got to be there first thing, 6 a.m. at the briefing room, and we're basically going to get thrown out. So I felt horrible. But the next day, we we get to the briefing room, and he sits us down like three little kids, and he's like, he's chewing us out for what I did. And I told him, look, it's my fault. These guys had nothing to do with it. I chose this. This is what happened. I made some headway. I think the guy's credible. I met this witch doctor. So while we're in the room, knock on the door, Brazilian police comes in, and they've got all these transcripts from conversations. They have a wire going on this guy, and they end up finding that the witch doctor is also involved in coordination of another load with this guy, right, with this fugitive we're looking. And they said basically that there's a new guy in town, which was me, and we've got clearance, so forget about that small load we're talking about. We can open up the doors for a bigger load. So they're like, he can't go home. He's arguing with the DA. He can't go home. The guy got so pissed, he just left. He just walked away.
Now you're undeniable. And, they can't do anything about it.
Exactly. And so we end up working with the case. We ended up doing it, and eventually ended up arresting the guy he transited to go to another location, and we ended up arresting him. So
did he get to see?
It was great.
Did he get to see your face?
No, never
No.
knew who I was, never knew. And it was good because
Yeah.
we wanted to keep that business ongoing, all the
Sure.
time, ongoing, until it got burnt. And then we had to really get out of town.
Alex, that's insane. That's an amazing story. All I could think of, remember that movie Major League? The guy
Yes,
Serrano who would like do the prayers and like that big, huge black dude.
like that, dude. But
That's who I was
scary.
thinking of.
I can't imagine. I still see his face. I still get worried. I think later we learned that they actually had him whacked because he was, I guess he didn't do the right thing. But it was that night. That night, after that night, I also made a pact with myself that, yeah, you have to be flexible, but you cannot be off the grid because I put everybody on high alert. All these guys were crazy looking for me. They didn't know where I was, and it's
Yeah.
true. I shouldn't have done that. It was not worth it. All the misery that was caused because of that.
Yeah,
It scared the hell out of me too.
that's like a movie, dude. That's insane. I would not have done well. The witch doctor would have been like, the guy with the orange hair kept crying. I don't think he's legitimate.
But Steve, like you get that fight or flight syndrome, right? You either give up and die or you try, right? When I was a kid, and this is one of the reasons also why I thought I have to get my life together, right? So when I was a young kid or young man, actually, I was 18 years old. I worked in a construction landscaping company that we were trying to get off the ground, and I'm coming back home. I'm driving out in Florida, in an area called Cooper City. I just finished the job, and we're on a street that's one way this way, one way that way, a canal on the other side, right? And I get thrown off, right? I'm traffic is really bad, and I'm driving, and I've got a forklift and pallets of sod in the back, and I'm trying to get home because I got to go take a shower. I'm going to go out that night with a date, and a car is trying to beat traffic, comes into my lane and can't get back into his lane and is stuck. So I'm going fast, and it's either crash him, hit him, kill him, or try to avoid him, which is what I tried to do. I didn't really gauge well enough the weight I had on the back. I had a forklift with pallets of sod, and it sort of like threw the truck into a spin and right into the canal. So I had no choice. The windows on the truck were broken. It was just like an old beat up truck we used to use. And as I'm going into the water, I remember having to put my hand in because I'm hitting the side of the shoulder as you're going into the canal, right?
Yeah.
And all that weight is pushing it down. So I remember, I go down into the water. I'm floating in this cab. All I had a chance to do was, hold my breath. I'm trying to feel for where the windows are, and all I can feel is like a panel or door, and I'm panicking because I'm floating in this cab. I can't see.
Oh my gosh!
Murky, ugly water. Right?
Yeah.
And I know that the windows are broken, so I know that the windows got to be here somewhere. So I didn't realize the truck had turned around upside down. So I was floating in the cab, where the floor was the roof, and the roof was.
Oh
the
my!
floor, right?
This is like a night. You're giving me a panic attack. Oh.
Well, anyways, I was able to finally figure out where the water, where the hole was under the window. As I'm going down the window, it's sinking enough that my actually boot got stuck. And I'm thinking, I can't go out like this. I'm not going to go out like this. So I remember thinking, that's why I was telling you the story, because you have that fight or flight syndrome. And it seemed to me, at least in these situations, that's what would kick in with me, right? When I would panic, I would have that fight situation, right? So in this case, I remember slipping off my boot and just swimming. And I pushed off of the bottom of the canal, all muck. So I knew that up was the right way because you couldn't tell. So I'm going up and up. I'm dying to breathe. I'm trying to breathe. And finally, I come up and I see people are clapping. People had stopped and seen it, and people are clapping. And all I could see was, in the water, the blade of the forklift sticking out of the water.
Wow.
And I remember swimming over, getting out, and my legs then just started, afterwards I panicked, right? But at first, my instinct was to fight. So I think that's what this kind of thing that's in me, I guess it would keep me going.
Yeah.
I was using these instincts to keep on, right? But, that can only last so long in Undercover, right? Because sometimes you can't gauge it, right? So
that's got to be tough too, because you're having fight or flight, and you're choosing fight. But then also in that situation when the witch doctor is staring at you, you have to suppress, and your brain's having these chemical dumps of all right, let's go.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
no,
exactly.
but the fight part this time is to sit quietly. So that's got to be
Yeah, that's exactly
intense.
right. And I knew deep down, I was counting on the fact that hadn't done a deal with a guy yet, hadn't done anything that could get them upset for anything. In fact, I was someone he wanted to have on his side because I have an opening for him. I have the possibility to make money for him because he's got a guy who has a company in the United States, right? So I haven't done anything shaky yet. So
Right.
so that's what I was counting on, and it worked.
Damn, man, that's a crazy ass story. The story of when you were a kid being in the canal,
Oh
that's
yeah.
freaky, man. I mean, I have something that like lightly relates to it, but like I remember water skiing as a kid, doing like slalom skiing at like 40 plus miles an hour, and you wipe out, and you're so disoriented that you're trying to swim. You have a life jacket on, but you're trying to swim to the bottom, but your
Oh
jacket won't
yeah.
let you. But then you feel your legs in the air, and you go, "Oh, let me just let go."
You better, yeah. Let
And
it.
I'll and that's like that's a 3 second ordeal when you're a kid, but for you with that with being
It took me
sunk in
some
that,
time.
that's
Yeah, it took me some
insane.
time to get over. For a while, I didn't use seatbelts, and I was always a little nervous. I still have this thing when I go over a bridge. Like when you go over a bridge that you're going up and you can't. For some reason, that just panics me.
Yeah, I
I
bet.
just go through it. I go through it, but
That's
it's
thank
scary.
thank the Lord you made it out of that. I mean, that pilots program they have in the military, when they slam you into the water and then the capsule goes upside down, a lot of guys don't. They know what's going to happen, and still they can't get their vet. They can't get
Out of
their
the harness, yeah.
and they end up, the divers have to come in because they're going to die. I mean, and they know what's going to happen. So that's, man, that's
Yeah, the
totally nuts,
panic,
brother.
the panic sets in, and it overwhelms you, right? So I learned, thank God, I learned early on to try to like deal with that. So and I think a lot of undercover guys. I also I had a lot of influence. I had read Joe Pistone's book, My Undercover Life in the Mafia,
Yeah, he's
the real
great.
Donnie Brasco.
Yeah,
The guy is amazing still to this day. Every once in a while, I have some contact with him, and he is a true, like I always tell him, like he doesn't even think that way, but I tell him, man, you don't know the influences that you have had on other life. Because for me, at least, it was why I wanted to do the long term type stuff, because the things you learned, right? How to do this, how to work throughout those panics. So it was one of those things that, if you're going to do undercover work, you have to have, I think, a certain personality, a certain
yeah.
resistance, a certain type of thing, because so you're not subject to any corruption, you're not subject to panic or this and that. I mean, but you still have enough nerves and the fear factor that you can gauge when is right and when it's wrong to get in or out, right? So you have to understand that.
Yeah, it takes a special person for sure. I mean, the agency I used to work for, we had a kid that just worked as a reserve, and but he ended up getting involved with our task force, and he just was good at it. Like he would go alone and do buys, and he would chat and BS with these meth heads, whoever, and he did great. I mean, they totally believable. They loved him. He didn't end up sticking with the job, but he was just a reserve. He just had that in him. He was good at it. Like where
Yeah.
a lot of cops can't just stop being coppy. They're too it's like you can't have the high and tight and be like militaristic when you're trying to be the guy who's buying meth.
When I was running I was running at one point when we merged, when customs merged with, and became, we merged with immigration, then we became the Department of Homeland Security. I was given, I was by that time an assistant special agent in charge overseeing UC ops in different areas, right? So one of the things they wanted to do was start something with, in the terrorism realm, right? So we wanted to coordinate with the FBI, and we wanted to get the right personnel. And we had this one particular guy who was, Middle Eastern descent, had come over from another local police department. He looked the part. He spoke. He was born in that country, and they immediately assigned him over to me. But this guy came over, and I guess they must have inflated his ego or what. But when I met him, he was like, he came in with, you know, he had the bald head, really looked, he was in shape, looked, that he could do something, right? But he had this big chain with a big old medallion here, and he was like, "Okay, I am ready to do the undercover work." And I'm like, "Okay, wait, dude. Do you know what
Yeah.
we do here?" And he's like, "Yes, I understand that we can have a undercover apartment, undercover car, and undercover telephone." And I'm like, "Yeah."
I like those things. Give them to me now.
Yeah, yes, and this is so you don't even know, yet what you're wanting to do, but immediately you want all this stuff. And I knew he wasn't going to work out, and he ended up not working out for us. But you can't you can't make someone. And I remember, and Lorenzo and I talk about this a lot. Like we would do, we would be presented with a case, right? And so we were like, all right, you're an undercover agent, Alex. You need to do this. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Just because I'm an undercover agent for this particular investigation doesn't mean that I fit the right bill for
Right.
that investigation. Oh, you speak Spanish, you could do it. No, also not it. You might be able to speak Spanish, but not infiltrate the group that they want you to do. It's not easy like that, and a lot of people don't understand that. So that's another mentality you have to come over and understand. And as a supervisor, you have to understand it even more, because if you're allowing people to work undercover on investigations that have oversight over, you need to keep those people safe. You need to make sure that they're the right guys for that job.
Yeah.
Because just because the guy's Hispanic or the guy is, whatever.
Or nepotism, like, oh, this is our, we want this person to do it because they know whoever, or they're, a hard charger.
Correct.
Doesn't mean they're going to
Correct.
be good.
And the reality of it is, yeah, I had access to all these really neat cars and all these cool, locations and all that stuff. But the reality was that I never really enjoyed that, because you're more worried about getting evidence, securing this. Is this guy going to know, that's going to happen, this guy wants to introduce you to his daughter. You don't want, you can't, you have
Can't
to
enjoy it. Yeah, you're like
play on-
stressed out.
Correct. You have to be playing on that line, but never really crossing that line. So that's a balancing act. You have to. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah, these are all tools that you're using. They're not like early in my career, I was a natural resource officer, and I was assigned to the boats. And people would be like, "Oh, isn't that? I mean, your job's paradise. You're out in the boat, I'm like, I'm out in the boat with a vest on, a gun belt. I can't drink beer, and I can't fish. So it's not. And I have orange hair. You think it's that fun? It's not that
How
fun.
fun is that going to be?
And I'm like,
but people see you. They see you, showing up at the office, really, or you have the undercover locations. Because I later then decided, if I'm really going to do this, I'm never going to show up at the office. I'm going to go real, because you have to, because people are following you and they're checking up on you.
Sure.
So, but when they see you, they hear about, oh man, these guys, they have the coolest cars and they dress in the best clothes and they do all this stuff. The reality of it is, none of that matters, because it's all a facade, and you're just, inside your nerves are killing you. You have to throw up before the meet, that kind of stuff. So it's not fun.
yeah, it's not like you're like really enjoying that apartment that got you, or that car. You're just thinking about business the whole time. It's
Exactly.
not like,
Exactly.
How did they regulate you guys with a friend of mine who was on the Vice Squad in L.A., and they by the time I knew him, he was retired and working at the background unit. But he said when he was doing it, and I think it's still this way, you could have a certain amount of drinks while working. Like I think it was 2 or 3, and they gave you money to buy people drinks. But they'd be like, yeah, but if someone buys you a drink, does that really count towards your 2? Like that type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it the same way? They just keep it under control, but be believable type of thing?
There was a parameter. You just had to make sure that you were not impaired. That's it. You were not impaired. If you were, it depends on the setting too, right? So if you, and for me, thank God we had the right boss that could say, all right, you're going to meet, I'm going to meet. So we had a case where, all right, we know we're trying to get this particular organization to use our warehouse and use our facilities to bring in their dope, or we're going to launder their funds. So, all right, they want you to meet the guy who is in charge of their transportation. Okay, great. All right, well, let's meet him at the Rusty Pelican restaurant down in South Florida, right off of Key Biscayne. All right, so right away, if you get a boss that says, oh, you can't go over $50 or whatever, you don't do the meet. At least I didn't, because that's not going to happen. You got to go into that meet with the flexibility that if you got to spend $500, you got to spend $500. And if you're going to have a drink, you're going to have a drink. I made it a point never to do any drugs, right? So to me, if it was Coke, which when I was in Brazil, that guy followed me into the bathroom and he goes, come on, go ahead. And he popped open a little silver thing he had and it was filled with Coke. And I'm like, no, man, I can't. Because, the whole thing was that we were going to be with these girls. And I was like, no, I can't. It messes me up. So that was my excuse. But I swore to myself, because I knew later I'm going to have to be sitting on a stand testifying. And then they're going to say, well, isn't it true you did cocaine? Isn't it true you did this? So I wanted to be able to say, absolutely not. I didn't. I was clear-headed the whole time. I know he said this, So all that was in my mind. But now drinking is a different story because I could always hold my liquor and hold my own. And as long as I was not to the point where I was 100% impaired, I'm going to have a drink. And sometimes I'll nurse it. Sometimes I wouldn't. It all depends on what the situation was, right? So, but yes, they didn't want you to spend a lot of money, but I did it anyways. And if that case called, I did what the case called for. I can always sit down in front of anyone and say, why did you spend $500 on this dinner? Here's why. We had target number 1. We had target number 2. Here's what we discussed. We got recordings. We got bank accounts. We got all this. That advanced the case. If you don't want me to do that for $400, then you're in the wrong business, So
what are you going to do? Like I'm actually on a budget. My wife got me on a budget here.
Yeah.
I'm on $50. So what? Hamburger?
because the purpose of a lot of people think, undercover means we're going to go, let's go eat and drink. No. What is the purpose of this next move? Why are we going to a restaurant? Why are we going to a bar? Why don't we just do it on the street? Why don't we do it in my office and open up a bottle of vodka? No, we have to do it here because there's a certain purpose. Maybe it's public. I want to be able to show. And at the same time, you fill that restaurant with other agents and they're taking snapshots and they're potentially recording for you in case this happens or that happens. Maybe you go with a guy at the bathroom. There's an agent in the stall that can, verify certain things.
Yeah, I get it. Absolutely.
Sorry, I thought I lost you.
No.
But anyways, but yeah, that was what it was. I pushed that regulation to the limits.
It's a big deal too with just face-to-face stuff with the way people are, human nature. Like they want to break bread with you. They want to have some cocktails with you. Otherwise, they're not going to be comfortable. Like they have to see that you're, get to know you a little bit, see that you're, you can't be operating like a robot in front of these guys because they're looking for anything to not trust
exactly.
you.
And I, Steve, in my situation, I was able to pull it off, right? Because I was a business guy. I was, I worked for my uncle. I had to have a level head. I wasn't a guy who was addicted or
Right.
My hats are off to the guys that are in these infiltrate like these biker gangs, right?
Man.
Like the ATF guys that have done that. They the balance they do to be believable in those things. That is a juggling act, and my hats are off to them because I don't know that I'd be able to do that. But in the world I lived in, the world I created around, I could, because I could say, look, I just don't do that. I drink and I have my business. I have this, or, and in the world that the people that I played with would have say, okay, that's believable, because a lot of them didn't do it either. Right.
Yeah.
The biker world, it's a whole different world. You have
to we had
basically prove it.
We had Lou Velozzi on, who did a lot of Undercover with the ATF. Man, I mean, he's a big jack. He looks like a biker, big jack dude, tattoos and stuff, but incredibly difficult because bikers, they by nature too are just like wild. Like they want to, and they want to see that you can party. Like, are you an animal?
You gotta be right there with them, right? So for me, there's the perfect thing. Like they would say, all right, Alex, you're a Hispanic, you could get in there, go infiltrate the Mongols. Dude, how am I going to do that? I have no thing. I don't even know how to ride a motorcycle ride.
Right.
They eat me up, chew me up, and spit me out.
Right.
Now, you want to talk to me about Cuban drug smuggling? Absolutely. Colombian laundering? Absolutely. I can run in those circles because I understood it. I knew it. I had familiarity with
right.
it. But so that's where you have to recognize. And as a manager, I also vowed myself to anybody that I manage in undercover ops. I want to make sure that I'm protecting them as well.
Yeah, set them up to succeed. Don't throw them into a
correct
situation that's not good for them.
Understand the situation, and that I learned from the great Joe Pistone, right? Because having read his book and then later meeting him, he understood that concept, and that I picked up when it was my time to start operations. I got all those tips from all these guys that had done all these great cases.
Yeah, he was he came on the show. He was great, and he was like just big into working out. He was strong, and his convictions were strong. So like when they want him to drink, he'd be pissed off. I don't drink. That's for pussies. Like I work out. Like he owned it. He just threw it in their face, and it was believable because the guy and he did work out all the time. So it was kind of like, all right, that's his thing. It's not a big deal. Alex, I've kept you on here over an hour. I do have a few more things. If you got a couple more minutes.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Whatever. All right. My time is yours, Steve. Oh. And thank you for being flexible, man. The last time,
Oh, absolutely. Believe me. Like I said, that rescheduling is something I have to do often. So yeah. It just happens. So one of the most favorite questions asked is advice for new officers, and maybe in your case, people looking to become feds. What would you say to somebody getting into your line of work?
So I would say to keep your options open. I would definitely, if you're into for example, I was talking to somebody yesterday whose son is a Border Patrol agent, been on the job 5 years, and is looking, what should they do? Should they stay and look? And I would say, listen, you want to get into investigations, more specialized, and I'm talking again in the federal level. I guess for local PDs would be to make detective and then work specialized investigations.
Right.
Similarly, you do that with the feds, right? I went from interdictions to investigations, and I think that's where it's at, because as you develop as a law enforcement officer, you will find that you'll get to know yourself. You'll understand better what your skill sets
are. Yeah.
Yeah. Some guys are great at the IT, and so get into a fraud a group, that kind of thing. If I happen to like and really liked the drug world, it just fascinated me. So to me, I sort of and the undercover world. That's where I really wanted to be, because I thought I could really do good. So I focused on that in my investigations, right? So my advice is to, do that always with a safety in mind and a career path in mind, right? Because you don't want to get to the point where you are just the undercover agent, right? If you're just the undercover agent, then people start saying, well, he wasn't a case agent. The case agent really is the one who controls the investigations, coordinates with the U.S. Attorney's Office, coordinates with the supervisors and administration, coordinates with Washington, getting you budget and funds. That guy then becomes a more developed agent who then, when a manager's job comes about, he can get it. And the undercover guy is he's the guy who's risking his neck, risking his life,
right?
Has probably all kinds of issues at home for being out at all hours and taking calls at all hours and protecting his family. And when the time comes for promotion, it's well, he's just the undercover guy. This is the guy who made the case, which is all BS, right? So a lot of good managers will look out for that, but that still exists. So I would say, if you're in that, get to know yourself, see what focus you want to. If you do decide to get into the undercover type of investigative skill set, then keep in mind those things, right? Do it for a little bit, get that into your system, and then always seeking to better yourself down the road, so that you can become more marketable, and then down the road get other opportunities. Like for me, another thing I wanted to do was go overseas, right? And that I was able to do. I was able to work in many offices overseas: Venezuela, Colombia, Italy, Spain. My last assignment was as the Attache of Spain, and it was probably the best way to end the career.
Would you be open to coming on for another interview talking about overseas stuff? Because that sounds like we could talk for another hour.
Oh my God, yeah. There's so much to talk there about, coordination with the locals and how we worked with them. The whole different mentality. They have their beers. They have their systems, but they're professional and amazing to work with. And we did many incredible cases with them too.
That's awesome.
So yeah, anytime.
Wise words, man. Thank you for putting that out there. I mean, I think I had a buddy who I was working with, and he waited a while to do the federal thing. He wanted to do investigations and drug work a little bit more than the local scene could offer. but he waited, and then he had just bought a house. He had a fiance, and the DEA came calling, and it's like it takes a long ass time to get on there.
Yeah.
And now it's like, then they give you,
Should I go? Should I not?
they're up front. They're like, hey, your first, they basically told him the first 5 years, you're going to be in New York City. You're on the coast. New York is just a hungry beast for agents. You're going to be there. And then he knew a DE agent who said, like, you're not only you're going to be there, you're going to fight and scrape to get out of there because they don't want to let people go. So you're going to have to get some seniority to get out because they need so many agents there. And just the way it was presented to him at this point in his life, on the precipice of probably making sergeant, he was like, I just bought this house. Can I do this? I think it probably waited too long because it's kind of a young man's game to get in there, travel, be undercover, do all that fun stuff. If you have people at home that are really depending on you, it's way harder.
Yeah, you have, if you're still willing to make that sacrifice, Steve, then I would say the federal way is at least that's the way I chose, right? But I've talked to I have a weekly meetings with these retired NYPD guys from different precincts in New York.
Yep.
They were detectives, they're investigators, they're all kinds of things, and they had a great career, a fantastic, incredible life and world, and they make great pensions. So
sure.
You at his stage. For me, it was like the way in, right? I had no choice. This was the choice I had to make. And I'm
not even a question.
Right. It afforded me the opportunities for my family that I have today and all this, right? But for a guy like your friend who is already kind of settled and he's got to weigh, is the job that they're offering me now going to be in the future better for me and my family? Probably at the beginning, it's going to be great because as a federal agent, you have all this authority across everywhere, and it's incredible.
It's exciting.
But down the road, exactly, and most likely you will end up in one of these, drug source countries, right, overseas, because all of them do, right? I know I worked with them overseas, and when we talk next time, I will tell you all about that. But that's what's probably going to happen. So if he's willing to do that, then it is. But if you just bought a house and you got a family and you're setting, and you're going to be pretty set in what you got going, and it's going to afford you a pretty good pension down the road.
Right.
I don't know. You got that. That's decision time.
You got to want it. You got to want to do it. Absolutely.
You got to figure out what path you're going to choose.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what I always say, Steve. Bob Starkman wrote a book, and he put a lot of cool things in, and he kind of inspired me to start working on mine. And that's what I'm thinking of the title, right? It's the path we choose, right? It's not always, I like that. The path we take is not always the path we choose, right? It sometimes life takes us a certain way, right?
Yeah.
So that's what you have to do.
So, Alex, one more thing. For the Patreon, for the sergeant level in Patreon, they can ask a question if they want. So This is a gentleman who's Andrew. He's thinking about getting into law enforcement, and he's got a question for us. So let's see. Andrew says, my question for you is, what are your most and least favorite aspects of the job? Also, if you weren't a police officer, what would be the career path or choice? So I'll ask you, Alex, if what were your favorite aspects and what would you do if you couldn't have done that?
So my favorite aspects of the job was the camaraderie with the guys and the creative process, right? We would sit around and figure out, all right, we got this case. How do we do it? What are we going to do this time? All right, let's tell the guy that the load got taken off by, this or that. And so to me, that was the creative process of that investigation, and moving forward on that was, to me, the best aspect of the job. I couldn't wait. I could not wait to get to the office and sit around and figure all that out so we can then go out on the street and play. That to me was the best aspect of the job. The administrative stuff and all that stuff was horrible, but the creativity of being able to do good, like you'd come home sometimes and you felt, after making a really good seizure and arrest and putting an organization out of business, you'd think, wow, today I earned my paycheck. I did a good thing. I put somebody away that's really hurting people. So that to me, and I know it sounds corny, like, oh, helping people, but that to me, the cool thing about that was that aspect. That was the aspect for me. Like, wow, man, a sense of accomplishment, I guess.
Okay.
And if I didn't do this, I'm not sure where I would be, right? I don't know if this job has put me in so many different paths, right? I've had the ability to be to do a little bit of acting. I've had the ability to do a little bit of management, travel. So I'm not sure. I always liked this type of work. So I have to be honest with you. My if I had not gone the path of law enforcement, most likely I would have probably been doing something in the aspect of either arts and entertainment because it's something I really like.
Okay. Excellent. I'm going to go with you, the camaraderie. I agree with that. I really like it is a job where you are, it's an important job that's been around for a long, long time, and it's needed. And like you said, you can see the results of your work. You can see how you are helping and you're contributing something that's needed for society. And that's like, because I have friends that have jobs that pay 10 times literally what I make. But they will tell you, isn't it cool being a cop? Like, isn't it cool to like actually like get out there in the community and like you have like a real purpose driven job. And for them, they're just making usually money, a lot of money for other people. Like, it's just like, it's cool. They got awesome lifestyles, but like really they don't feel that purpose in their work. So for me, that's it.
Right.
The downside for me would be working in a state like Massachusetts where Massachusetts, California, pick your coastal city, politicized. The job's been politicized. You're always getting hammered. The courts aren't necessarily the best, easiest to work with. It's like you catch a case, you follow all the way through, and then it's like no one's on your side. Like your technicalities, all this stuff that they will find and try to discredit you after all your hard work. That is really hard for me. And I'm going to say exactly what you said, Alex. I like the entertainment industry. I like doing this podcast. Like if somehow this thing took off, unlikely, but if it did, like really exploded,
I hope so.
that'd be great. I would do this podcast. I mean, I really enjoy this, and I would probably keep my foot in law enforcement. Where I am is it's Western Massachusetts, very rural, but there's a lot of little towns that need help. And I'm a firearms instructor, so I would probably stay on. I would probably offer firearms qualifications for departments that don't have instructors, things like that. So for me, that's my answer, Andrew.
That's pretty.
Yeah, so that's
Pretty
how,
cool, man. And I hope that your podcast does take off because you offer Steve an open platform where guys like me can sit and talk, and hopefully guys that are thinking of getting the job like Andrew and guys that are thinking of that are already on the job and might want to hey, should I go this way, should I go that way, that they hear something that helps them. And I wish these things were around when we were like getting on board because
me too.
this was me. I based my police stuff on Hill Street Blues and Miami Vice. That was my
Right.
Oh, that's what cops do. Okay,
Well,
but
like you said, Alex, with Joe Pistone, I get emails that talk about guys like you that come on the show, and it pushes them over the edge to becoming law enforcement. So that is like the best email I receive. So someone's going to hear Alex Alonso, incredible stories and how cool your career was, and it's going to make somebody go in that direction. And we need some kind of force out there doing that, because it's exactly. All agencies can't get people now. It's like no one wants to do it. So I thank you for your contribution and really sharing some exciting and fantastical stories from the job, man. I mean, incredible career.
You, thank you, brother.
How can people? Are you trying to build a following or anything, or do you have social media?
At the moment, I'm on like Instagram and Facebook right now. I'm trying to. I've just started back getting into this, and like I said, I have been working with Bob, and I'm starting to jot down notes and going to start writing.
That's great.
My story. So at the moment, it's just this. Hopefully by the time I get back, hop back on for the overseas portion of this, I'll be a little bit more organized and get
We'll support you best we can, brother. Let us know when it's happening. I'll edit the shows and put the link to your book. We'll put it on Facebook. Have you back again to talk about it? I mean, if you're willing, that's
awesome. Of course, absolutely, Steve. Anytime, man.
That'd be awesome. Well, Alex, it's been an honor having you on, brother. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm gonna close the show out. Can you hang in the green room for a second?
Absolutely. Thank you, and Thank your audience, man.
Thanks, sir. Guys, the great Alex Alonso. Wow. It's going to be a hell of a book because I can tell he's got so many more stories, so it's going to be fun to have him back on, especially the overseas stuff, because I'm kind of in the dark about that it even works working with other countries, them being the lead. You're along for the ride, but you got your job to do. Sounds like fun. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. And it's that time of the show when we thank the Patreon sergeants. So let me just pull them up. And who I'm talking about is Lane Campbell, the great Gary Steiner, Adam Mihal, Chris June, Andy Biggs, the great William James Long. That's Deputy William James Long to you. Tony Fahey, Seth Wright, James Rose, John Shoemaker, Jake Pinedo, Brandon Hooker, Alex Wazik, the great Lauren Stimson, the great Sarah Pomeroy, Dylan Pyrozic, Jason Lau, Nathan Gowan, the great Mike Wynn, Glenn Topping, Corey Payne, Sasha McNabb, Braden Walker, Sean Clifford, Tammy Walsh, Parker Brower, the great Scott Minkler, Rick McCormick, Ben Peters, Greg Gadboy, he told me in an email, Andrew Horton, Elian Rogers, Motorcop Chronicles, Zip Tessier, I'm going to go with Zip on that one, Luke Erbig, Andrew Proctor. Thank you, guys. You're keeping the lights on over here. You're supporting the show, and I truly, truly appreciate that. That's it for this week, guys, and I'll catch you next time.